Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I have another episode of 3D Interference. And today, what I want to talk to you about is education, which really is indoctrination. All of these videos that I am doing recently in the 3D Interference series are based off of my new book, Starseeds and the Great Awakening. And I'm breaking down segments of the book into smaller videos, kind of bite-sized short videos for people to explore the topics. And if you're interested and you want to learn more, you can buy the book. And today in the book, I separate it into high frequency children. I talk about starseeds in the beginning, which by the way are adults as well, not just children. And the middle is 3D interference, where I go through the many areas of our reality that are interfered with. That's why I call it in 3D interference, negatively interfered technology and different techniques to suppress the population. And then in the end, I talk about the future and what I see coming based off the sessions that I do with both children and adults for concentrated in the last 5 years, but a lot of this information I've known for about a decade or a little bit more that I integrate into it. And so in the book, I talk about education throughout, but I really leave the education interference part in the third part of the book in the education section. But today what I decided to do is I'm going to separate it into two videos. So the first part of the video will be the 3D interference indoctrination, kind of just raising awareness, explaining things that I have talked about for 5 years now, and more concentrative in the last couple of years, 3 years, starting 3 years back when I started my channel. I started speaking about education and children. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. And then I will do a part 2 talking about all the positive things and where we can go from here. So I'm going to separate it. Otherwise, it's going to be too long and I'll get lost in my thoughts. So today we'll talk about education and indoctrination. And like I said, I've been talking about this stuff for a really long time on a lot of different platforms, a lot of different channels all over YouTube and different podcasts. So I'm going to repeat myself with a lot of things, especially for those of you that have been following my work for years now. But I feel like this is a good place to put it all together in one spot so that those that are new to all of this information, it will be easy for them instead of having to go back and watch a bunch of interviews I've done. I'm putting a lot of it in here. And maybe, a lot of times things come to my mind while I am doing these videos, and then some new information could come through. That happens all the time. Even after I wrote the book 3 months ago, I'm already thinking a few times like, oh, I didn't put that in there, I should have. And more things are coming to me every day, but I'll just make a part 2 at some point. But for now, I want to talk about education in it of itself. And I'm talking about children all the way through university level and why that is included in the 3D interference section. And I want to start by saying I'm not an educator. I do not work at schools with children. I never have. So I don't try to pretend anything that I am not. I am informed simply through my own children's educational process, as well as the sessions that I do with parents and children for the last 5 years plus. And I've learned a lot of this stuff as I go. And I talk about this. I've talked about it in a lot of my interviews. I talk about it in my book as well. And I explain in detail kind of how I got to where I am. So I'm not going to get too much into that. But what I will say is that I've learned a lot of information, and I have to admit and be very transparent with everybody watching that my first son, who just turned 18 and graduated high school and is choosing on his own to go to college, he had a choice and he's choosing to move forward in that direction. And that's his choice. I don't tell him what to do. And I never had a problem with his schooling. I have to be honest with everybody. I never questioned it, never thought too much about it. And I think that's because my oldest, Jordan, he is the type of child always he just kind of blended in really well, never struggled with much of anything. He was friends with his teachers would always say he's friends with everybody, gets along with everybody, wasn't really bullied or picked on. I think just because he was just such a likable person, very humble and kind. So he didn't have a big ego. So he wasn't much of a target. And he's very intelligent. And I joke he doesn't get that from me, because he is so super smart, way beyond my intelligence level, at least in this body, in this life that I am able to tap into. And I struggled a lot in school, and he didn't. He never really needed tutors. To be honest, he never studied. I would walk into his room and I'd say, "Do you have homework?" He said, "I already did it," and didn't study for tests. And that's completely opposite of my experience. So it was hard for me to wrap my brain around how smart he was and how easy school was for him all the way through. I mean, he struggled a little bit during the pandemic period with the online class because it was so abruptly different, but he's still, without a lot of effort, he does really well. So, and I was also a room parent for him in his elementary years. And there were things that were red flags now in hindsight as I look back, but overall, he was also in a pretty good school that I never had any complaints. All the teachers were lovely. So I want to be clear that it's not like I've been advocating for a different education system, for forever. That's just not true. I'm not going to lie. In fact, for Jordan, it was beautiful and smooth and never had any issues, very rarely. So it wasn't until the pandemic period and and even before that, and I talk about that in the book, my two youngest, the two that came after Jordan, Aramis and Skylar, they did struggle, and they have struggled a lot in various ways that I do explain in some detail in the book without, giving too much of their, personal information out there. And it kind of opened my eyes to the educational process in general. And I really started to pay more attention. And then it wasn't until the pandemic period where I really just buckled down and I started to pay really close attention. I started to advocate more for them because I saw so many things that I felt were wrong and unjust for these children. And it really spearheaded a movement for me that I really wasn't expecting, I never had any foresight of what I'm doing now. I always thought that I would work in energy and maybe open up a beautiful metaphysical center for children. And that I thought that's what my daughter wanted me to do with her when she came to me a year or so before I got pregnant with her, and in spirit, and told me who she was, when she was going to come, and that I needed to, she was asking for my help in a very big role she was going to play in humanity. And I didn't understand what it meant at the time. But of course I said, absolutely. And I couldn't wait. And I thought we were just going to do spiritual stuff together. But now I look back and I think that would have been beautiful, and it is beautiful, but that's really not what humanity needs. They needed a strong, driven, personality type to come in and be a pioneer of a movement that I know. And so I'm not trying to put myself down. This is just raw, honest truth. I would have never felt that I had the confidence, or nor did I have the confidence to even take something like this on, because I didn't believe in myself as much as people might think that I look put together now, and I'm advocating and speaking out, and they say, "Sherri, you do it so well. How you say you're shy, but you speak so well." It's taken a lot of practice and a lot of courage. And over time, I focus on what's important, and I don't worry about how I look or how I'm coming across. I just have faith that everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to. So that's kind of how I ended up in this arena. And when I have sessions with parents all over the world and with children of all ages, just going into preschool all the way into, graduating from their master's program and beyond, is because I work with the adults too. And they're telling me, at 60, 70 years old, ready for retirement, how much they regret. And I see a lot of information in these sessions on the indoctrination of humanity, which starts with our children. I apologize. My dog is in the background making noise per usual. So how do they get to the children? So I first want to start with the age of the children. So children are very multidimensional, and they aren't truly grounded in there or anchored into their bodies until they're about 6. Between the years of 5 to 7 are very important years for children, because that really starts to define who they are, and they start to lose the imagination or the kind of the blending of realities, and they start to realize and tap into what's truly real, and what based on how other people react to what they say, what their peers are doing, and their parents and family and their environment. And so they start to hone in on what's acceptable and what's normal, I suppose. And they begin to really they have the opportunity to lose themselves, that higher vibrational aspect. Their spirit starts to change based on that primal aspect of their humanness, if that's a word, and out of a sense of survival or fitting in, and being normal, you know, because children don't like to be different, at least not the previous generations. Newer generations are just completely okay with that, and they don't care what other people think. At least that's what I'm seeing with a lot of the children that I work with. But most oftentimes in the previous generations, children will do anything to fit in, and that's where we get into trouble. So 5, 6, and 7 are very impressionable years for our youth. So it's no accident that these school systems are designed to bring them in kindergarten at the age of 5, because that's when they can hook them and pull them out of that multidimensionality aspect of themselves and anchor them into 3D, where they have more control over how that's done through the school system, which is just a front for this indoctrination process that they do with our children. And so they start at a young, impressionable age, and it begins. And there are so many layers to what they do and how they do their, you know, work their spells or their magic. And one of which is, and I talk about this in the book, I've talked about it in several interviews, and I've talked about it in a few conferences that I've done. These energy grids that they place around the schools, the technology that they use to, what it does is it distorts. So we all have an energy body, then we have the physical body, and there's a communication between the two. And our energy body is very vibrant and has a lot of energy. And these children, it's expansive. I mean, it's beyond measurable to in my opinion, even with technology that we have. Their field is so bright and vibrant and strong. And when they go into these facilities that look like prisons, energetically, they have a distortion mechanism where they can affect the energy body of each of the children that walk through, and the teachers, especially those that, unfortunately, poor thing, they don't understand, they don't know either. So they're targeted as well. That's something I could talk about later, because I never want to bash teachers. That's never my intention. There are many thousands and thousands, millions of teachers all over the world that are incredible, and they want to do the right thing. They are just forced against this 3D interference when they walk in the door, and they didn't see it coming. And that's a whole other challenge. But right now I'm speaking about the children. So they come into these buildings, and their energy field is distorted and disrupted by these energy frequency waves, this bandwidth that it's kind of like the voice of God technology that I talk about in the book, and that I did a recent video on. And it not only sends negative affirmations, and does all that negative programming and subliminal messaging, but it also disrupts the energy flow and the balance with the body. So the energy body doesn't communicate well with the physical body. And then there are a lot of side effects of that: headaches, difficulty concentrating. And really the why is what I should explain. Why they do that is so that they don't have a strong connection to their intuition, their higher self, the part of them that knows right from wrong, knows more than they're capable of understanding or saying. And they cut them off at their source, so that they don't tune into that, and they are tuned into the 3D interference and what they want the children to pay attention to. So there's disruption going on that affects the communication of the light body, the energy body, the higher self to the physical body, causing all sorts of physical side effects. And then they place them in these buildings that have fluorescent lighting. They're designed to look like a prison, long hallways, small box rooms where concentration of age groups and teachers that can then work on the programming aspect of it. And so that's the whole other part of it, is now we've got their attention, because we've got the fluorescent lighting messing with their concentration. We have the 3D interference grids that are distorting, disrupting, disconnecting them from their light and their power and their capability of knowing from a higher source of wisdom what's happening to them. So now they got them, and then they're young again and impressionable, like I mentioned. Then the indoctrination starts with the content of information that they're given, which is, there's lies in it of that whole process of the school and the content that they've placed, the curriculum. Not much has changed since even I went to school, and I'm in my 40s, and and I speak with people who are much older than me that say that not much has changed when they see that their children and grandchildren, a lot of the same things that they're learning, nothing has evolved. None of the content. It's the same information, and because it's his story, so it's the history that they want us to know, and that includes. I'm not just talking about history. Literally, I'm talking about the math they want us to learn, the social studies, the government, the sciences, all of it. They have decided in the powers that were that these are the things that children are allowed to learn. And as they go through higher grades, this is what they're able to learn as they go up and evolve. But it's confined to what they want us to know, and nothing goes outside or beyond that. And if it does, it's discredited or discounted or said, oh, that's woo-woo. So there's no spiritual talk in school, no spiritual science, no mindfulness, math, none of that. It's all very cognitive, left brain processing that their curriculum pushes. So everything is very based on memorization. You memorize this. You don't think for yourself. This is what you're supposed to learn, and then you take a test, and then you learn more, and you memorize it, and then you take a test, and then you memorize more, and then you debate it within the confines of what they feel is appropriate. Then you take a test, and then you keep going, and it's constant programming and manipulation and indoctrination. So they have our children's attention and their mind. They sabotage, and then they create what it is that they want through their curriculum, which is why I don't believe in curriculum. And that'll be in the next video. So they have our children's attention 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, with those negative energy grids, the subliminal messaging, the voice of God technology with negative affirmations. Then they've got the teachers breaking them down. Again, I love teachers. I've met amazing teachers, and I teach myself now. I teach children in my classes, and I teach a lot of adult classes for way longer than I've been working with children. So I know what it's like to be a mentor, and I know what it's like to teach, because that's one of my favorite things. And I've always taught in some capacity, especially professionally. I've always been a trainer. So every time I worked at a job, I went into a leadership position, and I became a management, and I trained. And I know I was one of the best trainers, because people told me, you're one of the best trainers I've ever had in my life, because you actually want us to know everything. You don't hide anything from us, and you don't put us down, and you talk to us like equals. And I do that because I remember being in their position and not being treated that way, and hating it, and not understanding why. So I take that role of a teacher very seriously, and I think many do. And there are many teachers all over the world that are doing it for the right reasons, but they don't realize is that they're being manipulated as well. And they're bringing in these newer generation of teachers that are so programmed themselves, because they went through the programming, and they don't realize that they're teaching these children, what they're doing to our children as well. Some of them do, and they quit. Some of them do, and they rebel, and they try their best. And then ultimately they'll find a position in another school, or a private school, or a Montessori or something, and they eventually are able to find their way to something better. And then I work with so many that have just given up. And I've worked with so many clients that are principals, or they have retired, or they're retired teachers, and they say, I had your idea 20, 30 years ago, and nobody would listen to me. And I say, you were just pioneering the energy movement, the energetic manifestation of what's meant to happen now. So what you have done, if that's you watching this, you didn't fail. You projected out what was coming in the future, and you held the space for that energetically. It just wasn't time yet. And through quantum entanglement and my daughter coming to me, I picked it up. And now I'm doing what I can, and many others are doing it all over the world. So nobody lost. It's just you set the path and the tone, and then now I believe is the right timing for a lot of this. So that energetic manifestation is now becoming a physical manifestation of things that we have been growing in the higher consciousness of the collective for quite some time. But now we're getting there. So the teachers program the children based on their limitations of what they're told they're allowed to teach, or what they're allowed to accept. And I know a lot of them don't agree with it, but they have to follow along, or they lose their job. So now the children are being told, listen to your teacher, only speak when spoken to, and they get graded. and grading is another one of the worst things that we can do to our children, because it teaches us that there is someone outside of ourselves that could tell us what is right and what is wrong, especially things that are subjective. How is it that children get low grades in art and PE? Now, I know that that's possible if they're clearly not participating or they're withdrawn, but they're so tired from the other stuff. They're looking at those classes as a break, to be honest with you. That's what a lot of them have told me, and that's what my son told me as well. Oh, I took it, it was an easy A, but then it turned out that the teacher took it so serious that they ended up having to work for it. So there's a lot of multidimensional aspects to all of this, but our children are trained through a very left brain cognitive analytical structure based on memorization, reciprocation, and these test taking, and then the standardized testing, which the schools get funding for. So they want us to compete with each other through grades, but then the schools also compete with each other with the schools to get funding. And so our children are just cash cows. They're just bringing money in. They're just dollar signs. And again, no wrong of a lot of the teachers and principals that don't know any better, but that's the harsh truth of it, is that these schools are not designed, at least the public school system is not designed for our children to thrive. It's really just to prepare them for when they come out, and so that they'll be just like the adults, programmed and receptive to whatever the agenda is at the time, and they're less likely to talk back, they're less likely to speak out, they're less likely to think for themselves. And that's why so many people during the pandemic period weren't able to think for themselves. They bought into every single narrative that was told to them, and only the people who are out of the box thinkers were like, hold on a second, this doesn't sound right, even when everyone else didn't agree with you. I was one of those people. I was that crazy person in my family that was like, no, something's wrong, this doesn't make sense to me. Probably because I had a medical background, so I know a lot about anatomy and physiology to begin with, and I was in the ICU for 10 years with animals, and it's a lot of the same drugs, a lot of the same things. So I didn't buy into it, and even my own husband thought I was a little bit nutty, and thank God he listened to me, and it all worked out for our intimate family. But for the most part, we lost friends, a lot of friends, because of that. And so anyways, going off topic, that's what happens when you indoctrinate the children and they grow up to be adults that are less likely to think for themselves. And they just think logic, logic, logic. And sometimes logic is important and good, but sometimes you need to go with your gut and your instinct, and you think from your right brain and really tap into another level of awareness to see, hold on, is this an illusion or not? Do I believe it or not? Yes, 2 + 2 = 4, but does it really? That's why I don't like math. Truthfully, it's because I'm terrible at it, but also I like the idea of there being different realities and choices, and not everything always adds up exactly, and that's okay. And they don't want our children to grow up that way, and they want to push competition. You're competing with the child next to you to get into that college you want, or for that promotion, or not promotion, well, I guess kind of like promotion in the class, whatever the word is that I'm thinking of, that they're fighting for, and the status, and pushing, school government and everything. It's just a smaller version of what they want us to walk into as an adults and buy into with no question. The school system, in and of itself, the word school is just loosh. It's an anagram for loosh, which is how the 3D interference feeds off of the population through negative energy, fear, manipulation, greed, shame, all of that. We give off an energy. So when we're in shame or fear mode, the vibration that we're in ripples out, and that is loosh. That is energy that we give off, that they can then come over and basically siphon. And then it's food for them. They don't eat real food. Well, some of them do. That's a whole other video. That gets complicated. But energetically, they're able to siphon off what's compatible for them, which is anything negative, especially shame. They don't thrive off of joy, happiness, positivity, because that's a vibration that doesn't align with their vibration, and they can't feed off of that. So the loosh school is loosh. They want to stress out our children, pin them up against each other, promote bullying, even if though they pretend that they're not promoting it, they do. that it's not a safe space. They push agendas, which I talked about in the woke agenda video. And if children don't follow along with that, then there's bullying involved, and it's really difficult time period for children. And it's also awkward because they're trying to find their true sense of self, who they are. They have hormones involved. And if they have teachers and peers telling them that they're wrong about certain things that they once had conviction for, and they are taught not to trust that gut or trust that intuition, then they will lose that. And then they will grow up and they will give their power away to their boss or bosses or other peers or romantic relationships. And it starts with children. When you tell your child to go against their gut, when they are afraid of an adult, or they won't look them in the eye, or they won't give Uncle Harry a hug, whoever, I'm just making up names, and parents don't believe them and push them into going out of their comfort zone, you don't realize that you're inadvertently training your child from a young age not to trust themselves. And it's okay to go against that if mom and dad say otherwise, because then they learn in school, same thing. Oh, well, if I'm wrong, but my teacher might be right, so I'll trust my teacher over myself. And then the principal, because there are hierarchies in children, a lot of these children really respect the principal. So now it's like, okay, if the principal tells me that I'm wrong, then I must be wrong. So it's just the layers and layers and layers. And we slowly lose ourselves over time, or we don't trust our gut or our intuition. We're not taught to follow that in school. We're taught that 2 + 2 only equals 4, and you have to show your work, and you have to be a good little boy and a good little girl, and listen to everybody and what you're told, and be quiet, and all of these things that we don't realize. If you put it all together, all they're doing is they're dimming the light a little bit at a time, over time. And it disconnects the child from their multidimensional self, and it truly anchors them into 3D. And it's just preparing them to be among the masses of the sheeple. It's not my word. That's the word that's used a lot. Again, I don't have any judgment or disrespect, because I was once a sheeple too, even though I fought against it. And I had moments where I was like, oh, I don't comply. And that there have been many. But despite what people might think, I was also afraid. And I went with what I was told many times in my life in hindsight. So I was one of those too. And so spelling in the school, one of the craziest sessions I had with a child was when they told me the reason they weren't going to speak our language, they were labeled non-verbal autistic. It was a young boy. Actually, I've had boys and girls tell me the same thing now, was that they weren't going to speak our language because they didn't want to say, they weren't going to cast spells and summon demons. And I thought, holy, what? At first. But then I realized, oh my gosh, it makes a lot of sense. So a lot of the spelling that we have now are words that our words were changed over time. I'm going to get into this more when I get into light language. But, back with our ancestors and our galactic ancestors and our inner earth beings, we speak telepathically, and we speak through light language. And it's a beautiful melody that has an overall message, as opposed to it being broken down word by word. And the reason that the dark players and the dark agenda did that is so that they could create their word spells by breaking up the beautiful harmony of the entirety of the message into one word at a time to create a sentence, which distorts the flow, but it also creates an opportunity for them to change the language any way they want, or alter the language and create these root words or the Latin origin for what it is that they truly want you to cast the spell for. And I talk about that more in the book, but now we're teaching children, they're having their little spelling bees, and that's just teaching them to cast spells, and to buy into their propaganda of, spell casting and going along with it. I had a session with a young boy once that told me, you guys need to stop using the word ball. There's a reason why balls are in every child's home, and they're affiliated with children, more than any other toy. And then of course we have professional athletes that of course use balls for various sports. But what he told me is it's actually BAL, which is Baal, which is one of their deities that they pray to in the dark religions. And when children are constantly saying Baal, or parents are pushing it for their first words or this or that, or we're constantly saying, go get the ball, do it. We are constantly praising and calling upon their negative deity, their God, and we don't realize it. Now, of course, we're not going to change the word ball right now, and I've just said it like 6 times, but I've already consciously said many times I do not consent to the spell casting, and the words that I use for the convenience of communication does not cause any harm to me, and I don't allow portals to be opened up, and I do not allow my speaking to cause me to participate. And we can do that for anything. So I hope that people that have watched previous videos that I've done have seen a theme of me trying to empower people by saying you can combat almost everything that they try to do through your intention, our positive intention, and saying I don't consent, and making certain choices and doing certain things to combat it. And spell casting is another one. You know, you just simply say, I do not consent to these spells, like I just mentioned, and you continuously reiterate it so that you're firm in your intention and where you stand, that it doesn't affect you and you're not participating in the spell that it created. It's null and void for you. And so it is done. And we can do that when we know. The problem is that most people don't know, and I didn't know that until I was like, I don't know how old I was, my late 30s when I learned that. So there you go. What else can I talk about? You know, they're all constantly pushing agendas for our children, and they are using the schools to be able to have them without parents around for hours out of the day, like I mentioned, so that they can push agendas. Look what they're doing with the children in the transgender movement, and the non-binary, and the gender confusion, and the sexuality, sexualizing our children with their sex education. You know, I don't believe in that. I believe that it's my responsibility as a parent to teach my children, or child, if I had one, about sexual orientation and all of that. If that came up, it's my choice how I want to teach my child. Should it be taught in the school? Now, basics of anatomy and physiology, sure, there should be some health classes, but there has to be a fine line to that. Again, this is my opinion, so I don't want to start a debate. I don't want people leaving comments that you're wrong, or this is just my opinion, this part. But I think it's clear that the extremes they go to indoctrinate our children based on the content and the information and what they're bringing in, with the transgender community coming in and reading stories, or the books that are going in to the school libraries that are part of the curriculum now, where children are supposed to read about sexual what's it called, sexual information on gosh, I'm losing my mind with my words. They're sexualizing the children through sex education, I guess, taking it way too far, and it's completely inappropriate, teaching children about oral sex and this and that. So if parents aren't paying attention, they have no idea what they're saying to our children in the school, how they're programming them, and how they're manipulating them. And as children get older, the content and everything just gets even more detailed, more intricate, and indoctrination just gets stronger and stronger. And children are not rewarded for their ability to think outside the box. Some classes, far and few between, I'm sure, have that, they promote that. But for the most part, they are taught the same classes for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Nothing's changed. And then they sprinkle in elements of other stuff just to make it seem like they are giving children you know, something more modern, something advanced. But in reality, the core curriculum hasn't changed in I don't know how many years, to be specific. And a lot of the stuff, you know, our children can learn more on Google these days than they can in the classroom. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that, because there's a lot of things on Google that is not true. And we have to teach our children about social media, and you know, why don't they talk about social media in the class? They starting from a young age, to warn children about that. There's nothing in the curriculum for that. Yet they're still talking about Thanksgiving and the stories that they talk about surrounding our history. And so nothing has evolved. Nothing is changing, and nothing is evolving in a positive way. It's just feeding in more to their biased narrative and their agendas and what they want to push and what they want our children to learn, so that when they go into the university level, it's only stronger. So they're only learning what they want the youth to learn to go into that particular career. So let's talk about law. So they're only going to teach the youth, the young minds in the university level what they want in the law system and the fake laws and all of that indoctrination. And so they're going in, they're believing everything as truth, coming out completely indoctrinated. And they don't realize that it's all lies. Same with the medical field. They don't teach anything of value in the medical textbooks other than the pharmaceuticals and how that runs the entire operation. And they don't learn about holistic medicine and the organic route and nutrition. It's all very small electives. And I've spoken to many doctors that said that they don't learn any of that in their school. In their schooling. So the indoctrination chain starts at a young age. Let's just say kindergarten, but we know that many people put their children in preschool because of school, because of work, and they don't have the ability to stay home with them. So they're putting them in earlier and earlier. But we'll give the benefit of the doubt, and we'll just say 5 years old as a starting point, because not everyone can afford preschool, anyways. So 5 years old, they hook them in, they take them in the left brain indoctrination narrative. Memorize, test, take, compete with everybody else around you. Don't think for yourself. No creation, no imagination. Follow these guidelines only. You listen to what we tell you, and that's it. Homework is given unbelievable amounts of homework. These children shouldn't be going 8 hours a day, 6 to 8 hours a day at school, and then they come home and they have hours worth of homework. Half the time, I would throw my kids' homework away. I don't make them do it. I don't participate in it. And if they don't do well in school, then that's too bad. And I've luckily had a lot of understanding teachers that said, just have them do whatever you can. I have spent many nights, admittedly, I've done the homework for them when we were in a bind. I know that you can judge me all you want. I'm going to get some nasty comments for that. I don't care because I'd rather take 2 minutes for them to get the check that they're going to get, the completion, which doesn't mean anything. And they wouldn't have learned anything. And a lot of this is busy work anyways. I'm not going to put them through that. I'm going to let them have fun and go play outside with their friends for that extra half hour. And it takes me 2 seconds to do their worksheet for them because I don't believe that it adds any value to their educational experience. It's just more memorization, and it just creates more anxiety for the children. Another agenda that they push in the schools are the labels. I'll do a separate video on disconnecting from labels because it merits its own attention. But don't be fooled by the focus on labeling our children with ADHD and behavioral issues and Asperger's and all the other dyslexia, all the other things that they do to make our children feel bad about themselves and to push them away. When in reality, they are the ones that show that they have true gifts and they have the ability to tap into the right brain. And just because they don't follow the left brain system, there's something wrong with them. They have behavioral issues and we need to medicate them. And so those are the starseeds, and those are but to the dark side, those are the troublemakers. Those are the ones that need to be controlled because they can't be controlled through the typical indoctrination system. So we're gonna first of all, we are going to point them out to embarrass them, separate them from the other children, push hardcore medication or something and counseling on them to make them feel worse about themselves, make the parents feel worse about themselves and their own children and feel desperate. And they're so overworked and busy themselves, they don't even have time to deal with it. So they'll just do whatever they're told as well. Again, no judgment. That's just the reality of the environment that they've created. Many of these parents are wonderful parents, and they have come to me saying, oh my gosh, I did this. I didn't know what else to do. I listened to them. I believed them. I thought I was doing the best for my child. Now they're just complete numb shell of themselves. They've lost their personality, their life spark. They're not interested in doing anything. They won't eat. They won't do anything. What happened to my child? Well, your child is medicated, and when they're medicated, their vibration everything just goes right, and they shrivel down, and they can focus, sure, but they can focus on what the dark players want them to focus on, and not what's important, which is their multidimensionality, their beautiful spiritual gifts, their abilities, all of that, just because it doesn't fit in with the box of what's normal, according to them, then we have to change something about them. When in reality, they're beautiful star seeds that are coming here to change. And the good news is many parents are waking up to it and saying, I don't buy into this anymore. And a lot of them aren't medicating because they don't believe in it. And they are seeking other opportunities for their children, educational opportunities, which is what I'm trying to do and what I'm creating. So I just want a quick disclaimer. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not telling anybody to take their child off of medication or not to give their child medication. That's not what I'm doing. I just am trying to raise awareness on the implications, but also the reason why and how it affects them negatively. And there are other options, but that is going to be the choice of every family. And I know some that are in extreme cases that the medications did help for a short period of time, and the parents are on it. So again, no judgment to anybody, and nobody should be judging others, because until you live in that family with those specific variables and all the things going on with that particular child, and nobody can say anything because they don't know the details. So where do we go from here? We pay attention to the children and what they're learning. Pay attention to what your children come home with and what they're being, if they're going to stay in public school, then look at what they're learning. Advocate for them. If something doesn't seem right, speak up. Ask about the books that they're being told to read. If there are field trips at the school, make sure you know where they're coming and having a library read day. Find out who's coming and who's reading to them. And if you don't align with it, then they don't participate. You pull them out that day. You do whatever you can to advocate. But what we really should be doing on a larger scale is fighting for what's right for our children and making big changes, which is what my part 2 video is about, or will be about, where I go into kind of where do we go from here? How do we change things so our children thrive, so that they love to learn again? Right now, most children don't love to learn. They're okay with it. And a lot of them, I always ask children that I work with, what's your favorite subject? Do you like school? What's your favorite subject in school? More often than not. And I work with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children all over the world, all different ages. What's your favorite subject? PE and art. Some say reading, very few will say math. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with math and the core subjects, because some of them aren't actually very into those, because they're probably going to be engineers one day, or they're here to be a left brain thinker to do a job like that later on. So we don't want to discount that. That's okay. They actually enjoy it, then that's something different. But they like the social aspect of it. They like to go to school. I mean, my own kids admit in the summer they're bored. They are like, I wish I could go to school. I just want to play with my friends. They don't say, I wish I could go to school because I want homework and I want to sit in class all day. They just miss the social aspect of it. So we need to create and manifest something better for the children, where they are excited to learn. They're learning things that are actually relevant and important, not just the core subjects, but real life relatability. Conflict management. How do you manage your emotions? Explaining the multidimensionality of all of us, and that it's okay to be different. And what are your gifts, and how can you tap into it and explore them further, as opposed to hiding them from others? How do we raise awareness about animals, and how important the role that they play in humanity, and that they're not just food, and we're not above them. How do we guide our children on how to take care of the planet? And I don't mean the fake narrative that's going around on climate control. None of that. I'm talking about true unity and respect for the planet that we live on. How can we take care of this planet and the wildlife and the oceans and the air and the atmosphere and everything? How can we work together? How can we communicate with one another? How can we understand our intuition? How can we tap into our intuition? How do we work together as teams? How do we understand the differences between different cultures, not religions, but cultures? genders, but in a way that's respectful and understanding and open-minded. You know, these are the things: how to cook, how to sew, how to manage your money, and not with the dangling of, you know, the materialized society that we're in. You know, how can we cheat the system and get credit cards and get all this stuff that we want that we don't need? No, how do we manage our money the right way? And that's going to change too with the money system changing, which, so we need to evolve. The point is that we need to be flexible and evolve with the time. So I'm going to talk about that more in another video. Today, I just wanted to talk about the 3D interference, you know, the food that they feed our children, how they, I mean, there's so much more than what I'm saying, but it's really hard to put it into one video, in one thought process. You know, I don't really prepare for these. I just kind of let my mind flow as it comes, and it's really hard to like think in the moment of what I missed, what I potentially missed. But I think that the main points were covered today, and it's just about raising awareness. And it's okay if your child is telling you, I don't care if they're 5 years old, 10 years old, 13 years old, 16 or 18, I hate school. There's a reason they hate it, because they know that it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't make sense, it's unnecessary stress. They're not trying to be difficult for the most part. I'm sure some could be, but they're trying to tell you something. They're trying to tell us something as humanity, as a collective. That there's something wrong with this system, and it might have worked for a small period of time at one point, but it sure doesn't work now, and it sure isn't going to work in the future. And these starseeds are coming in year after year to open our eyes that the change is imminent and necessary. And if we don't listen, they are going to rebel. And I'm not saying we should be afraid of children. That's not what I mean at all. But what I'm saying is they're going to resist more and more. And they're not just going to be the good little girls and boys rule followers. But we need to help them now, because the 3D interference and all the other things that I talk about, they're pushing these agendas strong, is in any tactic that they can think of, without any cause for concern about the mental wellness of our children and the long-term effects. So they are working to manipulate and push them against us, meaning that the young ones, and looking at us adults as authoritative, unfair, mean adults. All the while, they're just stealing their minds and programming them to think that it's cool to not have a family unit anymore, that it doesn't matter if you have what gender you are, you can change your mind every day if you want, and it's okay to have a litter box in the classroom and have a cat tail and walk around meowing in school, and you know, it's okay to do drugs, and it's okay to wear skimpy clothes and have sex as a young child, and all the boundaries that they're going to cross. You see, what they do is they hook them in, and then they just keep pushing and crossing the line and crossing the line and crossing the line, until one day that these children are they don't know who they are anymore. They've completely lost themselves because they are so programmed. And that's what they're doing. They're targeting our children through social media right now, and the TikToks and the Facebook and all these tactics so they could steal their mind, not just in school, but out of school all the time, through TV shows, movies, the social media aspect, everything. It's to keep they're hijacking their mind so that they are disconnected from their beautiful souls. And it's not just about starseeds, just the children and the youth in general, because we're all important, we're all beautiful, no one is better than anyone else. And those that are unawakened, the starseeds, yes, they are here to help awaken them, but we all work as a team and we're all equally important. So this is a really important topic that I encourage you to think about, the different layers of, and hopefully I did a good job today explaining it, and I didn't go off too far on tangents, but you can see how they're all connected. All of it leads to ultimate control. Every single video I do is all just one component of ultimately controlling the population, so that we have no rights, we don't think for ourselves, we don't care about gender or relationships or family, and we can just be controlled, leading to, you know, transhumanism, AI agendas and even further, until we don't even recognize humans cease to exist, and then we're just bots. It's much more complicated than that, but that's where we're headed. I assure you, if nobody wakes up to it, which we are, but if we didn't, we would have already been there at this point. So we're doing really well as a population because we are, or a collective, we are waking up. But the more we can talk about these things, the better chance that we will have that we will shift the trajectory sooner. I already truly believe that we are at the point of no return, and we are, and positive things are coming, and changes are occurring now, even if you don't see it. I know it, I feel it, I sense it. The children tell me that the changes are occurring, but it takes effort and continuous effort, and the conscious intention of everybody that can and is capable to hold the space for this transformation. So share this video, like this video. So if you want to support me, you can buy the book, and there's more information. I go over a lot more in the book of various topics, and I try to tie it all together. But today, the focus is on the education and indoctrination of our children, and we need to fight for them. They are not for sale, as many people are saying right now in the shirts, and as a result of the movie that came out, and that is true. But they need our help. They need our help as the adults, as the warrior spirits. Those of you that have that warrior within you, to fight and fight for them. And I don't mean with violence. I mean with your integrity, your intuition, and your spiritual side, and your multidimensional wisdom. You know, and us working together as a team and bringing light to this planet. That's how we help our children. That's how we guide them. So again, the next video that I do, I will focus on the future and where do we go from here. I'll talk about Aramis Learning Center and what I have been shown, where I see the education system going. But until next time, I hope everybody felt like they got something out of this video. Please leave a comment or two. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll talk to you guys again very soon. Bye, everybody.